they say it gets easier after the third day.
Yes, but you are having liquids, I hope.
Yes, lots of water. Yeah.
Breathe.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, good. Okay, so
thanks for coming down.
I'm absolutely
Appreciate
here
that.
to answer any questions you've got. So,
Well, we've been looking at the manifesto, and good work. It's obviously the strongest manifesto ever in terms of the kind of stuff we're interested in, and that's obviously totally appropriate. I guess we want to very quickly run by you one or two reasons why we're concerned that it still doesn't go far enough.
Yep.
And have a little chat on that. So obviously it's brilliant that you're intending to hit a lot of targets in terms of carbon by 2030. That's great. And we'd like to see more in there about biodiversity targets by 2030. Then, of course, you've got your carbon net zero final kind of target 2045, and obviously it's really, really important that you get a most of the job done earlier. That means it's less important that the date is later than we'd like, but obviously we're still quite concerned that all the dates are later than we'd like. In particular, is later.
Do you want to just go through like a bit of the science about why?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to do.
Okay, yeah.
So basically, as you know, in XR, our target is 2025 for biodiversity loss zero and carbon net zero. And the reason for that is because we're super concerned and super scared about the science of the situation. And in particular, for example, we're looking right now at the Amazon burning and Australia burning. And it looks like there's increasing science to suggest that the Amazon may be getting close to a tipping point where it becomes a non-viable forest. That's one of many examples. We can talk about feedbacks, the terrifying situation in the Arctic with the methane melt and so on. The way we see it, the science is more and more strongly pointing to a very, very early date for net zero, for biodiversity loss zero. And we are frankly scared that if we don't achieve that kind of date, then civilization as we know it will come to an end. And when I speak to, I work at the University of East Anglia, I work alongside the world's leading climate scientists, and you read their papers, and they're pretty scary. And then if you go along to the bar and have a drink with them and say, all right, so that's what you say in your papers, so is that what you actually think? And they invariably say, no, I think it's worse than that. What I've got in the papers is what I can prove, it's what's there beyond reasonable doubt. But what I actually think, and in terms of what I think about my children and so on, I'm really scared about the future. So I guess the first thing we wanted to say to you, Sal, is how do you feel about this, and how does this situation land with you?
well, we absolutely agree with you, and the Climate Centre at UEA is brilliant. It's been speaking truth to power on this for years, even when climate deniers like former Chancellor Victor were allowed on the stage program, they absolutely stood up, which is great. I just want to say why we went for 2045.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then do a little bit about what we are going to achieve in 5 years, 10 years, because what we want to do is to reassure you that this isn't pushing everything down to the far end, because we are as concerned as you. But we know there are some things we haven't solved yet, which will take longer. So, for example, we still haven't found the right answer for heating homes. Now, insulating all homes within 10 years and 4 million non-domestic properties, which is what we're proposing, will significantly reduce the problem of fuel emissions leak from homes. And you may have gathered, we're also focusing on fuel poverty first of all, so that our absolute priority is to insulate those in fuel poverty, and we reckon it's over £500 a year saving in fuel bills on a side, but for us it's equally important, because we know that a lot of social housing was poorly built, not insulated, and is causing one of the major emissions areas. We're clear that we need to be practical about how many trees we can put in a year. 60 million a year from next year means that we will be a long way along the target. Within 5 years, we will have got into the mode of that sort of investment within communities, creating new woodland spaces, which is important not just for biodiversity, it's important for carbon capture as well. The insulation, I'm just trying to follow So the other big thing is bringing back renewables. I mean, one of our proudest things as a coalition was telling the Tories that there wouldn't be a coalition unless we could invest in renewables. As you know, they tried to backtrack that as soon as we went out in 2015. We're back committing to that. We want to make sure that 80% of our electricity is provided by renewables. Again, within that 10-year period. It's that last 20% that's the problem. And we would rather have something that was realistic, that we can speed up if we're able to. This isn't let's just push it away. This is absolutely worked out as a minimum, and with these waymarks on the way to make sure that we are publicly held accountable for it.
Yeah. So just before we get into the details of the policy, the questions, the initial first question I want to ask you, how do you feel when you look at the science that is, got increased staff over the last 30 years? I've been working in academia as well as Rupert, and it's getting so because even to the point where David Attenborough is now saying civilization itself is at stake. There is a risk of human extinction, and we are making extinct 200 species every day. 1,000 children will die today because of climate change. 1,000 children will die tomorrow, and that's going to start accelerating as we see these feedback loops kicking in. They're already kicking in 90, 100 years ahead of time.
I know that.
So our first demand and our personal practice as a movement is to tell the truth. Now, I've been working in academia for 30 years on this subject. It's only really in the last year that I've really started to tell the truth in terms of every day focusing on those 1,000 children that are going to die today, thinking, how do I want to use my day given that? And how do I want to use my day given how terrifying this really is? And because there's a form of soft denial that we all have, all of us. At some point every day we forget about the crisis. So how do you feel?
So me personally, I've just finished a period as a trustee of UNICEF, and we were saying 5 years ago that climate change is the biggest risk to children in the world. Most of the wars are caused as a result of climate change. So it's been on absolutely full in my face. Not just about children and fuel problems, emissions here. I have a granddaughter who has lung problems. She was very premature. We can't have any roads like this because she can't manage it. But I'm also concerned about those children worldwide who are losing homes, who are being killed by poor water, not access to water, who are being killed, a whole range of things, absolutely. Which is the other reason in our manifesto we talk about influencing the world, whether it's using WHO standards to improve air emissions, whether it's working with the various UN bodies to protect everybody, but from my UNICEF perspective, particularly children, because they are the most vulnerable.
So how do you feel?
How do you feel? That's why I can buy what's in here, because it's happening. Yeah. How do I feel about it? I'm horrified. I'm appalled. I see the consequences every day in society. As a politician, my job is to make it happen. And that's why our manifesto is so clear about the steps that we want to take. And I'm sorry it doesn't meet your deadline. We would say, actually, we're going to have done 80% of this by your deadline.
Well, our deadline is 2025 for a reason. It's about what's necessary, not what about seems politically possible at this point.
We are.
You quite rightly are. Telling the truth is an ongoing practice that we all have to engage in. And you've started that practice because you're calling it an emergency, and you're saying, you knew 5 years ago it was the most important issue for the children. So, we're starting to tell the truth, but that's an ongoing practice. It's not like you tick the box. So, basically, unless we push for 2025, like now, saying it has to be then we're going to just every day that we delay is an inexcusable delay, because that's more death and suffering and more escalation, because the accelerating emissions and the accelerating processes mean that it gets worse every single day that we delay. So when the Nazis were coming across the channel to attack us, we thought we would lose that war because they were far more powerful than us, much more investment in military, etc., etc. But we had to attempt to engage and defeat them. And so if going in now for 2025, we may think we can't achieve it, but we have to aim for that because that's what the science requires. The science is so stark now that there's a strong body of scientists which say it's too late. Now, I don't believe them, because as long as humanity exists, we have incredible ingenuity, the ability to cooperate, that we can achieve who knows what. But we have to start. If we push it back to 2045, the trouble
We're not pushing it. Yeah, we're not pushing it back. We're saying that's the latest by which we would finish it.
And I take your point totally about the importance of front loading. You know, that's really strong. That's really important. But what Larch is saying is that the science seems to be moving closer and closer to something like 2025.
I don't think we would disagree with that at all.
Great. There's also climate justice, right? There's the fact that we in Britain, we've got more responsibility for this problem than anybody else, and we can't expect everywhere in the world to move quite as fast as we do. So we really need to lead the way on this. And then there's also the precautionary principle that we might well need to err on the safe side. You know, this is our future at stake. This is whether or not our children have a future at stake. So as Larch says, an analogy which we think is really helpful is you're saying to us, well, this is what we're confident we can achieve, and if we go further than that, great. But we think it should be kind of the other way around, that we should be kind of going for the maximum, and then if we fall back from that, then not so great.
So we've got examples of that in history. We set ourselves a target of getting onto the moon. America did, and Russia did. Didn't know if they could achieve it, but let's do it by this date. They threw everything at it, and they achieved it.
So let me just...
If we frame it as this might not be possible, but let's go for it.
We completely get that. Let me just say something to you. I used to be a councillor. A long time ago now, but I was a councillor. I live in an area that's got a Lib Dem council, and over the last 10 years, the council has been working with the community to change the practice. Now, the council's led the way in saying we're going to recycle 5, 6, 7, 8 different things. But it's much more than that. So the culture in my town, Watford, is much more about protecting biodiversity and ensuring that the council support and the community support is for those things, as well as getting rid of single-use plastics, all the things that you would now expect. My son lives in I won't say where it is, but a non-Lib Dem borough where they don't sort. It's barely recycling at all. What I'm saying to you is, if you get a Lib Dem government, you're going to find that all the social, cultural stuff, the messages are going to completely change, because we can't do this on our own as a government. And one of the ways of speeding this up will be making sure that people insulate their homes early. We'll be giving subsidies, tax benefits for better off people. We'll be providing grants for the fuel poor. But the moment people start to realise they will save money if they insulate their homes, and they're going to get a bit of support from government, we think that's how we can make things happen much faster. But we need to be in government to do it.
Well, our 3 demands, as you probably know, is tell the truth, act now, and go and beyond politics. So tell the truth is this practice we were just talking about, and it's not a tick box thing. I think I would challenge you not to say I understand it as much as you do, because none of us fully understand it yet. Honestly, it's constant stripping away of the levels of soft denial and looking at how that works. So the act now is clearly, there's hope here, because you are saying act now, even though you're setting the date too far in the future. And the third one is really important. It's the Citizens' Assembly, and it's a different way of doing politics. So my suggestion, and I'd like to hear what you think of it, is that if we are telling the truth, and if you are telling the truth and I am telling the truth, then we sort of say that actually this is so urgent. When the Nazis were about to invade, we didn't say you need to vote for a Tory government to sort this out. So we need everyone pulling together on this. This is the most significant challenge humanity has ever faced. It's way more serious than the Nazis invading. So this is a time when we need all politicians to come together. So to move beyond party politics and say this is survival. This is survival for people around the world now, and for our future, people in our country in a very short time. And so we have to move beyond politics in that way, and have the Citizens' Assembly as the crux of it. Now I know you've got a Citizens' Assembly in here, but it's not enough.
Delighted to see that.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah. But it's not quite enough. This is the biggest challenge humanity has faced. You're nodding your head. That's brilliant. That's telling the truth. That's where we're at. And part of, I think, is to tell people that. People in this country don't realise that yet. So our job, and you have more power than I. A bigger voice than I, is to tell people that this is the biggest challenge we face. This is what we have to mobilise everyone together. We need to all pull it together. Unless people know it, we cannot get the country coming together on this issue. And so we need a national citizens' assembly which leads Parliament. We trust people. When people understand the facts and know the truth, they will come up with the right solutions. We've seen that many times around the world. We've seen it specifically with examples of citizens' assemblies.
Yes.
And so we need to, like, the politics, you know, you're absolutely right in here by saying the politics is broken, and it's great that you're naming that and saying we need to fix it. But fixing it, because that's what's got us. The parliamentary system, the political system we have, has got us into this crisis. We've known for 40 years emissions have more than doubled. So we cannot rely on that system to solve this crisis. We need to use everything we can, and the Citizens' Assembly at the moment seems to be the most viable option. So the big risk that you've got here is if you try and solve this crisis through policies that a party puts forward. We cannot afford that risk. We have to have policies coming forward that a Citizens' Assembly has mandated. Ordinary people from across the country, people like, you know, a builder, florist, they come together, they have the science, and they come out and say, actually it has to be 2025, and then we can do this, this and this, because actually the solutions to this crisis will make people better off, on average, most people, and it will make people less isolated and more connected. There is a lot to win from addressing this, as well as survival, you know?
And that's, we say that. We say that we have to change politics, and I know that's not your priority, but it's our priority.
Well,
because
it is
otherwise
one of our
we're
priorities,
sitting
yes.
on the sidelines instead of getting into power. So we absolutely have to change that, and we do see citizens' communities, citizens' assemblies, a whole range of different ways of doing politics as being vital to completely changing.
Yeah.
A bit of renewal, completely changing. So I'll be out of a job. I'm a member of the House of Lords. I'll be out of a job if the Lib Dems get into power, because we're going to abolish the House of Lords and replace it with an elected Senate.
Yeah.
And good.
Yeah.
Because we've absolutely got to change the old ways.
Yeah.
Communicating better with electors is part of it, but engaging people in different ways, whether it's community councils, citizens' assemblies, just making sure that people particularly start to talk about this, because government can do what it wants, but if people don't change their ways as well, we're not going to win this. We're really not going to
Of course,
win
that's
this.
right.
We have to lead from the front, absolutely, you're right, but we have a much bigger job. It's got to be, and I don't often like it when people use the analogy of the Nazis, but you are right, it is as serious as that. Actually, people were mobilised very quickly and changed their attitudes very, very quickly in the late 30s.
Yeah.
So I am hopeful that once that message really starts to get through, it will not get through as long as we have cancellation of the Swansea Tidal Lagoon, cancellations of other renewables, things like that, because people will think, well, actually it's not really as urgent as perhaps you think it is, that we think it is. We know the Green Party
The
thinks
science
it is.
tells us
The
it is.
science tells us it is, absolutely.
So when we look at your manifesto, we see that clearly there's some moves towards demand one, telling the truth, which is great. We see that clearly there's a move towards demand two, carbon net zero, biodiversity loss net zero by 2025, or as close as that's possible. You're trying to move in that kind of direction. Turning to demand three, which Larch has just been asking about, we're super encouraged to see you talking especially about citizens' assemblies. The really crucial point that I think was implicit in what Larch was saying is this: if we're going to achieve this kind of dramatic system transformation in a short period of time, we need to do it by empowering citizens to make it possible. And the idea behind the Citizens' Assembly's demand is basically this, that there's only so much leadership that it's possible for politicians to do. Politicians coming under pressure from moneyed interests, lobbies, from voters who are not necessarily, haven't necessarily always thought through every single policy or aspect of everything in detail, right? So when you have a citizens' assembly, it gives citizens a chance to really think it through in detail and get the absolute best expert advice and deliberate together on what they're going to do. So the key thing we'd like to say to you about what you've got in here about citizens' assemblies is we'd urge you to think about going further towards our third demand, in particular that the citizens' assembly that gets created nationally and other similar ones locally really needs to have some real power and legitimacy. It mustn't just be a talking shop. It mustn't just be, well, here's some citizens and maybe we'll take their advice, maybe they won't, maybe we won't. What we need to have is a situation where people can be confident that citizens are really looking at this, are getting the best expert advice, are deliberating, and then are going to be listened. And I suspect that anything less would also undermine faith in democracy again. So one thing I'd urge you to take back from this conversation is it possible that the Lib Dems might be able to move further in the direction of committing to implementing what a suitable citizens' assembly comes up with on this?
I would have to take it back to the team. It's not my area. My main area is health and social care, by the way.
Yeah.
So I will take that back to the team.
Great.
Happy to do that.
Super.
From my own experience, when I was a councillor in Cambridgeshire in the 90s, we had a citizens' assembly for budgets. The time when we were being told we couldn't increase council tax, we actually got a citizens' assembly together. I was in opposition at that point, but that's irrelevant. But the council as a whole did it.
Yeah.
And for 5 years, that annual citizens' assembly was really, really important, because it also meant we were able to persuade our wider community. When the citizens' assembly said, in order, for example, to fund social care and the elderly, we've got to raise council tax an extra %. They looked at all that detail, they absolutely understood it, but it also helped stop being those ghastly politicians up at County Hall trying to do something to us. It was something the community. So from a personal perspective, I'm absolutely supportive of the idea of using citizens' assemblies more widely.
In a mandatory way.
In a mandatory way. I
Great.
haven't got the details
Yeah.
of how that would work,
Yeah.
but we know from
We've got
various
strong
examples.
proposals on how it could work, detailed proposals.
Are you familiar with the climate and ecological emergency bill that we've drafted with Ron
The
Bailey
three
and some
demands
others?
bill.
I haven't read it, but I've heard that you've done that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this
thank
is a
you
bill
for
that exists and it's ready to go. All we need is people to support it. And so that's really why we're on hunger strike, is to say, look, this bill exists, we're in an election, we need candidates and parties to support this bill. So, yeah, we encourage you to read it, to you know, whilst telling the truth, whilst like engaging with what you can do each day to make the most difference that you can on this crisis, because it is the most urgent and serious thing that humanity's ever faced, and then to see how we can get the Liberal Democrats and yourself behind that and supporting that bill.
Is it possible, Sal? This has been great. Is it
I'm
possible?
terrible.
Yeah, I
Yes,
know.
I'm sorry.
We were speaking.
Do you want to borrow my blanket?
No, I've also got to go. I've got a
Yeah.
meeting to go to.
It's been really, really useful. In terms of following up on the differences that remain between us on the second demand and the third demand, and in terms of the three demands bill, is it possible that we might be able to have a follow-up meeting with some of your colleagues, such as, I don't know, Joe will obviously be ideal, but if not Joe, then Ed Davey, one or two of the other ministers with appropriate portfolios.
Ed, I'm sure will be. I mean, our Vera Hophouse has our climate
Vera,
change,
yes.
but she's not a London candidate, so
Sure.
it's harder for her to get
Yes.
here.
We don't
But
necessarily.
I'll talk to Ed.
We can have it somewhere else. as
Yeah,
well.
no, well, I'll talk to Ed and see if we
Yeah.
can arrange that.
Yeah.
Because we know he was Secretary of State for
Yeah,
Education
yeah.
in the Coalition,
Yeah.
and is absolutely passionate about picking up
Yeah.
where we left off
Absolutely.
and delivering this. So
Yeah.
we will see if we can do that.
Yeah, thank you. Because I appreciate you're willing to give your job up to get the reform in the Parliament. I've unfortunately had to give both my jobs up because of this crisis. Because by telling the truth, I was like, how can I be most useful every day? Both jobs were really valuable. Part of the solution, building eco houses. We built UK's Bristol's most eco homes. If we have 10 or 20 years to turn this around, my job made a lot of sense. But we have 12 months, according to the UN General Secretary, to take emissions from accelerating, as they've done for the last 25 years, to coming down. So I have to use every day as fully as I can. So
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Because
And
I know that's not a small thing.
No, it's not. No, exactly. And being on hunger strike, I treasure my health. And being on hunger strike is also, for me, a massive sacrifice. And I've committed as part of this global climate hunger strike that's happening with nearly 500 people around the world, over 250 in the UK. I'm on hunger strike because this three demands bill, I want to see it being enacted. And whilst we've got this election has to be the election about the climate and ecological emergency.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we've left it too late.
Yeah.
Can't leave it to another government.
No, we
So
can't.
we're going to be on hunger strike until we have this follow-up meeting and we see how these things are going to be implemented.
Yeah.
So really encourage that to happen as soon as possible.
will-
Because I want to come off hunger strike. Please help me.
Luckily, okay, I will take it back to it.
That's
I just wanted to
marvellous.
say one other thing. I mean, because I live in Watford, I know the building research establishment.
Yeah.
And I have been taking ministers round the BRE since 2005 to say, make eco homes a standard. And frankly, because I'm in a wheelchair, the second thing is, could we actually have lifelong standards so that we don't then spend lots of money on changing houses as people get elderly or like
Inclusive design.
Inclusive design.
Yeah.
Both of which are easy, available, affordable.
Yeah.
But the interests of big business has got in the way of that.
Yes.
And in the Lords, I and others have really fought against that.
Yeah.
And we're making some progress with the outgoing minister of the outgoing government. So regardless of what happens, housing, it's actually in the housing section in our manifesto, building all new homes to proper eco standards is absolutely top of our list.
Yeah. Sal, thank you so much for meeting with us.
Thank
we hope
you.
there'll be a follow-up meeting so this man can come up on the stroke.
Yes, yes.
And if it's not me, it'll be Ed, because
So-
I'm not always
yeah,
in
yeah,
London.
no,
Yeah, we
that's
were
what we'd
thinking
like.
that we could ideally would be someone like, so Ed does his environmental.
No, he's our shadow chancellor, so
right.
all
Okay,
equally
great.
important.
Very
Okay,
important.
good.
But
Yeah.
was Secretary of State
Ed,
for...
Vera, maybe
Joe.
also someone with responsibility for looking at the democratic side of things in terms of citizen
Yeah,
assemblies.
Assembly.
Or of course Joe, who we've met with
Vera
before.
used to be CLG, so she may be able to
Okay,
help.
yeah,
But I'm a
great.
member of the Make Votes Matter Alliance, so I mean,
Super.
I know that we're very supportive.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time and for the
We
calls.
will endeavour to be back so that you can come off your anchor strike. Keep warm.
That's great.
Perhaps you understand now why people in wheelchairs get so cold when you don't move.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
And good
Thanks
luck.
a lot.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks.
Take care.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good. Never had this.
Yeah.
Oh, there's your pen.
So if you guys want to confirm, then give me that name.
Right. How did you get on there?
Great.
Yeah?
Sister
Cool.
was for
Excellent.
plenty of cameras. She was it was quite hard to hear her from where I was standing.
Right.
And then see how the sound.
Yeah, well,
how her sound
you guys can check
the
like
sequences.
the different
Do you
sounds.
mind?
This one maybe.
Certainly.